Chapter 1096. That one look. 3. The woman's heart was clenching in pain, but she still remained expressionless, as if she was already numb to all things in the world. It caused the man's smile to gradually turn dark, and his expression slowly twisted. He seized the woman's throat, and veins popped up on his arm as he glared at her. "UBTCH, I am the third prince in the Emperor of Abyss True World. There is nothing that is impossible for me to obtain if I want it. You've humiliated me for 1,000-something years. Your escape has caused me to become the laughing stock of the entire Emperor of Abyss True World, and the other 3 great true worlds also learned about it. BTCH, do you know how grave this is? If you wanted to run, I would have been fine with it. This is embarrassing for a girl, and I can understand it, but you just had to get yourself acquainted with a barbarian from a primitive place, and even sacrificed your true breath of life for him. You almost truly died because of him, BTCH." As the man spoke, his expression continued twisting. He kept a tight grip over the woman's throat, making the woman unable to breathe, but her eyes were still aloof, and she looked at the man apathetically, as if derision hid in her depths. She did not say a single word. "Not speaking, are we? To revive you, I've spent a lot of effort pleading my father to save you. I did that so I could ravish you. I want to let you know just how grave of a mistake you've done in the past. If that barbarian died, he's lucky, but if..." "He won't die," the woman said in a hoarse voice. Her apathetic expression turned cold as she stared at the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World. The handsome man laughed loudly, then slapped the woman, the sound of it ringing in space. His action was seen by the 1,000-something cultivators from the Emperor of Abyss True World, but no one spoke. Instead, all of them chose to avert their gazes. "Ha ha! You've finally spoken. Not dead, eh? I long for it to be true, that he isn't dead. I want him to live so when I find him, I could make you suffer in pleasure right in front of him." A lascivious look appeared in the handsome man's eyes. Lust burned in them. "If you aren't worried about the abyss-devouring curse, I won't fight back," the woman said flatly. The spot where she was slapped gradually recovered, returning to normal. When she said that, the man's expression immediately twisted, and he glared at the woman. "The abyss-devouring curse was formed by the souls of your father and your entire race when they died to protect you. It won't be able to protect you for the rest of your life though. If I could have my father slaughter your entire race, then I can make father remove that curse on you as well. He has already promised me that once I reach Mastery Realm, he will fulfill one wish of mine. My wish will be you. I will absorb your primordial yin so it will stimulate the power of my blood. And once you woke up, you actually managed to nurture the aura of Abyss." When the man said that with a smile, he seized the woman's chin and gently moved his face closer to hers before blowing into her ear. "Wait for me. The day will soon arrive. Since you said that he hasn't died, I will find him. Don't worry, I will." The man laughed and swung his right hand to fling the woman's face to the right. The abyss dragon upon which they sat roared and rushed into the vortex in the galaxy. When the woman's face was flung to the side, a tear that the man did not see was also flung off and disappeared into the vortex. It was brought into true morning Tao world and flew into the nothingness. "Oi! Is it raining?" Su Ming lifted his head and looked at the sky. It was blue, as if they were in another world. By his side were Dao Lin and Dao Hua, and before him was a towering altar. The place was so quiet that not a single sound could be heard. Sang, who had brought them, did not pay any attention to them once they entered after him. Instead, he sat at the edge of the altar and quietly closed his eyes to begin meditating as if he was protecting the place. A drop of rain had fallen on Su Ming's face. It came from the sky, but there was only one drop. It trickled down Su Ming's face and slid beside his mouth, making him taste salt. There were certain times and certain things in the world that not even cultivators could understand, such as raindrops and tears. They might seem indiscernible, but in truth, when they were placed by someone's lips, they would be able to tell the difference between the flat taste of rainwater and the saltiness of tears. However, everyone cried, and even if cultivators had reached an unimaginable state, it would still be difficult for them to tell just which tear belonged to whom. Perhaps there was a certain level of cultivation that would allow a person to do so, but Su Ming had not reached it. It's not raindrop, but a tear. Su Ming stared at the sky. He could not see a single figure. It had been a teardrop that had been coincidentally flung to their place from somewhere else. It was as if there was some unseen force that had sent it to Su Ming, or else how could that tear have made its way to him? Why else would it have fallen on his face and caused him to feel the saltiness and astringency of it? Whose tear could it be? Perhaps it is hers. Su Ming lowered his head. The thing that appeared in Su Ming's head when he arrived in the area beyond the isolation grounds was no longer uncertainty about Dao Chen's identity, but a murmur by his ears which he'd heard often when he was younger but which had not reached his ears for 1,000-something years. He'd thought he had forgotten it, but in truth, it was a memory deeply buried in his soul. Big brother, my younger sister. Su Ming's gaze landed on the altar in front of him. Perhaps it was Dao Chen's isolation grounds, and in Su Ming's memories, he knew that the girl who had called him her big brother had eventually been taken away. Rumors had it that she was sent into mourning Dao sect. While he tasted the saltiness on his lips, Su Ming recalled the memory from the time when his soul was still in his real physical body. He'd been swathed in darkness then, and a girl's voice by his ears had accompanied him for years. She'd called him her big brother, so there was no way he would forget her. Su Ming stood quietly. He could not tell just what sort of emotion he was feeling at that moment. All the signs made it clear that he could no longer question it any further. Dao Chen was Su Xianxia, and the younger sister in his memories was the second god of Berserker's daughter. She had grown with him, but then had been taken away by Dao Chen, which meant that Su Xianxia had taken her away. Su Ming remained silent. He did not know what that girl meant to Su Xianxia, and neither did he know why he took her away in the past. However, Su Ming hoped that this was just a mistake in his train of thought. Dao Hua, step onto the altar. Sang opened his eyes and cast his gaze on the middle-aged man named Dao Hua standing by Su Ming's side. Dao Hua felt his spirits lift. Excitement appeared on his face, and he took a step forward. Once he bowed deeply towards the altar. With fervent order and reverence on his face, he walked one step at a time to the altar, fearing that if he moved too fast, he would seem like he was being disrespectful. When he reached the altar, his body suddenly shuddered and became vague, but it only lasted for the span of a few breaths before he became clear again. Ecstatic joy showed up on his face, and light beam that was 100,000 feet tall shone on him. The flourishing lotus on his body turned into 9 large lotuses, and when they surrounded him, his cultivation base instantly rose from great completion of world plane realm to lunar kalpa realm. The moon appeared behind him before it swiftly shattered to form a sun, allowing him to step straight into solar kalpa realm. Thank you, progenitor. Thank you, progenitor. Dao Hua immediately knelt down on the altar and kowtowed several times. The excitement and zeal on his face reached its peak. It looked as if the isolated progenitor Dao Chen just needed to send one thought to him, and he would perform the task given to him without any hesitation. After expressing his joy and thanks, Dao Hua immediately moved back in respect to return to Su Ming's side. His face was filled with enthusiasm, as if even Su Ming at that moment would not pose a great threat to him. The strange, shining light in his eyes also made it seem as if there were faint runic symbols in them. This was something he did not possess before he stepped on the altar. Clearly, when he paid his respect to the progenitor, he had not just obtained the activation of the flourishing lotus and a huge increase in his level of cultivation, he had also obtained other forms of serendipity. While sitting on the altar, Sang called out flatly, "Dao Lin." Dao Lin's expression became stern, but he could not hide his excitement. Still, his condition was much better than that of Dao Hua. He sucked in a deep breath, took a huge step forward, and with his unique icy cold presence, he moved to the altar. At the instant he planted his feet firmly on it, Su Ming saw his body shudder, just like what happened to Dao Hua moments before, and his body turned vague. The time which he spent indistinct was longer. It lasted for about a dozen breaths before he recovered to being corporeal again. The aloof look in his eyes disappeared, replaced by a thick wave of fervent zeal as well as excitement. His cultivation base erupted at that moment. He had already reached solar kalpa realm before this, so when his cultivation base experienced a burst, the sun he had formed shattered to turn into rain that drenched his body. When it fell on him, Dao Lin threw his head back and roared for a long time. His cultivation base increased with a bang by leaps and bounds, and from Solar Kalpa realm, he became one of the Almighties, a powerful warrior in Mastery realm. As he roared, cracking sounds came from his body. Not only did his cultivation base increase by leaps and bounds, even his physical body became stronger. The flourishing lotus shone, and 12 lotuses appeared to surround him. I, Dao Lin, thank you, progenitor. With excitement on his face, Dao Lin knelt down on the ground, just like Dao Hua had done. Once he kowtowed 9 times, he got up and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow to Sang. Only then did he return to Su Ming's side with excitement, surprised delight, and an even more complicated runic symbol than Dao Hua's shining in his eyes. Dao Kong. Sang's gaze fell on Dao Kong, and a hint of kindness flashed through his eyes. If no one looked closely, they would have never been able to see it. The only thing they could see would be calmness akin to still water. Su Ming lifted his head and cast a glance at Sang before walking forward quietly. He did not have Dao Hua's fervent zeal or Dao Lin's excitement hidden under a facade of sternness. Su Ming just calmly forward. But no one understood just how complicated and anxious he felt at that moment. The anxiety was not due to fear or terror though. Instead, it was an indescribable emotion of a son meeting his father whom he had not seen since birth, and was meeting for the first time after many years. Su Ming was not the only one who felt anxious and felt those complicated emotions. The figure sitting in front of a rattling drum in the dimension connected to the altar while staring at it felt the same way. Chapter 1097 That One Look. For one step at a time, Su Ming moved up the stairs leading to the altar until he eventually reached the top. He lowered his head and cast a glance at the rune formed by circles of countless runic symbols formed on the platform beneath his feet. Silence. The figure connected to Dao Chen's isolation grounds was silent. Time slowly trickled by. When the time taken for an incense stick to burn had passed, Dao Lin and Dao Hua's faces filled with puzzlement. Compared to them being able to immediately sense progenitor Dao Chen's will right after they stood on the altar, Dao Kong did not react in any way. Everything about him was normal. Deep emotion appeared on Sang's face as he sat by the side and meditated. He sighed softly before he stood up, then without a single word, he swung his arm and swept up Dao Lin and Dao Hua as well as himself out of the area so that they could leave the place to Su Ming. When Sang took Dao Lin and Dao Hua out, another dozen-something breaths passed before the air around Su Ming suddenly distorted. His body became indistinct, and a vast power came from nothingness, charging towards his flourishing lotus, clearly intending to activate the strange powers of the robe. Yet right when that power was about to touch Su Ming's robe, he lifted his head and took a step back with a cold expression. As his power spread out from his body, it crashed against the incoming vast wave of power. A loud bang shot up. Su Ming was forced 3 steps backwards, but he stopped the vast wave of power from activating the robe. I don't need you activating it. Su Ming's voice was cold. As he spoke, his eyes shone, and the power to reverse time swiftly spread out from his body. It was Abyss Builder's inborn ability, and the robe could only be activated by it. It might be known as the Flourishing Lotus, but in truth, the moment Su Ming wore it, he already noticed that the robe was clearly created using Abyss Builder's inborn ability. If he wanted to activate, he could do so himself. When the Flourishing Lotus was activated, booming sounds echoed in the air. A dazzling light spread out and turned into 18 lotuses that surrounded Su Ming, filling the place with flowing streams of light and creating a sight of peerless beauty. A sigh came from an unseen spot in the air. At the same time, a vast amount of life force descended. It was life force aimed to grant him a serendipity so that his level of cultivation could increase. In silence, Su Ming took another step backwards. Though there might have been quite a lot of times when I was not the one who increased my level of cultivation through training alone, it wasn't like this. Even if it was through external force, I would always have to pay a price, fighting for it with death hanging right over my neck. I obtained my current level of cultivation through various serendipities. Your life force is very precious. I can't have it. Goodbye. Su Ming turned around and walked down the altar. At that moment, there was no longer any anxiety in him, and neither was there any complicated emotions. These emotions had long since turned into resentment. Deep resentment. Ming The instant Su Ming turned around and took his third step, a voice spoke into his ear. The voice was very gentle, and it held an apologetic note. The instant it echoed in the air, Su Ming came to a halt. He closed his eyes, and at the same time, the rune on the altar suddenly shone. When its light reached a dazzling degree, a power of relocation swiftly appeared and covered Su Ming in it. When Su Ming opened his eyes, he was in a secret chamber shrouded in a faint layer of fog. The chamber was very huge, and through the fog, he could see a figure with its back turned towards him sitting cross-legged. A decaying and ancient air came from that body, along with a dense aura of death. While standing there, Su Ming could not see the wooden sword and rattling drum placed in front of the man, and neither did he see the figure hidden under the hood staring blankly at the rattling drum with a gaze filled with deep guilt. If Su Ming could see that, perhaps he would have remembered how he had asked his elder to make one for him when he was still a child and saw his other companions having that toy. On the second day, when his elder handed the rattling drum to him, Su Ming's joy had lasted for several days. Several years later, when Su Ming grew up and came to love climbing mountains with a new friend in Xiaohong, he forgot about the rattling drum and threw it aside. However, he should still remember that the rattling drum was the first toy for which he asked from the elder, and it was also the only one. When that rattling drum turned about and let out rattling noises, he'd felt like he was the same as his other companions. The man was silent, and Su Ming was also silent, but in the end, Su Ming was still the one who broke the silence. He sucked in a deep breath and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow at the man. "I, Dao Kong, greet the progenitor." His voice resounded in the chamber. There were echoes, and they lingered around for a long period of time, refusing to scatter. "I am the progenitor of Morning Dao sect, but not your progenitor." After a long time, a hoarse voice came from the figure. Su Ming did not see that the man's hand placed on the rattling drum was trembling slightly at that moment. "You should be able to tell that with our ability as abyss builders and your wisdom as my son. Your return to Morning Dao sect means that you have already understood this. I am progenitor Dao Chen, and I am also Su Xianyi. I am your father." In the end, even with an indescribable level of cultivation, the figure's voice still started quivering. "You jest, progenitor." Su Ming remained silent after that. He then shook his head and turned around to walk back. He sent a divine thought to the bald crane, asking it to help him leave this place. He did not want to stay in this place. He absolutely did not want to. Before he came, Su Ming had imagined what would happen when he met Su Xianyi. He had been anxious, filled with complicated feelings, but when he truly met the figure, he noticed that no matter how he thought about it and tried to remain calm, he could not force down the resentment in his heart. He resented this man. This resentment was so great that he simply could not overlook it. "You." The figure shuddered for a moment. Su Ming could not see that the tremors of the hand placed on the rattling drum had become much stronger. Sadness could be seen from them. "I can make it up to you, Ming you know this. You should know my hardships, Progenitor, are you done?" Su Ming stopped and turned around to stare at the figure with a sullen face. A ruthless expression appeared on his face. "You are you, and I am me. It doesn't matter to me whether you are Dao Chen or Su Xianyi. You are you, and I am me. You can continue with your plan, but stop using me as your chess piece. Today, I am not your opponent, but once I've been your chess piece for long enough, I will surpass you. You are you, I am me. You have your plans, and I have my own pace." Su Ming swung his arm. He turned his head around and took a step forward. Rarely enough, the bald crane did not kick up a fuss or bother Su Ming. Instead, when it noticed that the atmosphere had turned incredibly bizarre, it obediently spread out its power, making ripples appear under his feet when he moved forward. With the bald crane's power, Su Ming wanted to force his way out of the place, which caused him to be unhappy and raised that strange anger in his heart. He was afraid that if he remained for a moment longer, he would be unable to suppress his anger and cause his other personality to appear. "Your family name is Su. Your name was given to you by your grandfather. In your body flows the blood of the Abyss Builders. This is a reality you cannot change. I can understand your resentment. I will use what I can to make up for the past. The figure spoke in anguish, but before it could finish, Su Ming stopped once more. Even the ripples beneath his feet dissipated. His hair instantly turned red, and a wave of madness appeared in his eyes. This was the Su Ming with the destructive personality. However, this time, the red-haired Su Ming did not want to bring forth slaughter and destruction. Instead, he wanted to vent out the endless resentment buried in the depths of his heart. At the instant his hair turned red, Su Ming laughed loudly. He turned around and stared at the figure. Red filled his eyes, and the crazed air about him became even more apparent. Make up to me? Make up to me, what a phrase. When I was a child and asked the elder where my parents were, his silence made me hesitant and fearful, and from then on, I no longer dared to ask this question. At that time, where were you? How are you going to make up for that? When I watched my companions returning to their houses with their parents whenever the sun set, I was the only one who went back to my house alone. When I was staring at the moon quietly, where were you? How are you going to make up for that? When I was a teenager, I watched the sky time and again on Dark Mountain, imagining that one day, my parents would come and pick me up. Where were you then? How are you going to make up for that? When I was bullied by my companions, mocked for having no parents, when Lei Chen fought against them every single time, where were you? How are you going to make up for that? Make it up to me? What a phrase. You want my resentment to disappear with such simple words? This is hilarious, so hilarious, it's so utterly absurd. I'd like to ask you, Su Xianxia, when I found out that everything around me was just an illusion created by someone else, how do you think I felt? Can you make it up for my sadness and confusion? When I discovered that I had gone through 30-something cycles of my life in the same dark mountain, can you imagine how I felt? Are you going to make it up for that feeling of being deceived by everyone too? When I discovered that I was just a soul in Dark Mountain and my body was used as the core of a rune and a tool for cultivation practices, do you know the cold chill that ran through me in the darkness? Are you going to make up for that as well? When Di Qian manipulated me time and time again, controlling my destiny repeatedly, where were you? You have no right to tell me you're going to make it up to me. When I was forced to leave Dark Mountain and got thrown into the barren lands of divine essence, when I was lying in Crimson Flame Planet like a corpse, where were you? And this is even more laughable. When I had already told myself that my parents were no longer around, I found with an aching heart that my mother was lying in the 5th kill. I can understand her predicament, and I won't resent her, because even after she died, she still held me so that I could feel a mother's warmth. But you, where were you? You let a child who thought he did not have parents learn that he's actually not an orphan, but this isn't something that would bring excitement or surprise delight to him. You never felt it before, so you don't understand, but I do. It brings only extreme pain and confusion. Chapter 1098 That One Look. 5 The crimson-haired Su Ming threw his head back and laughed. His laughter was filled with madness along with the resentment he had accumulated over the course of countless years. It was a resentment that came from since he was in Dark Mountain, and right then, he had allowed it to erupt for the first time. The resentment in his outburst reverberated in the chamber, causing the figure with its back turned towards Su Ming to remain silent as he trembled slightly. Make it up to me. What are you going to do to make it up to me? How are you going to make it up to me? Su Ming swung his arm with red-filled eyes. When he turned around, ripples immediately appeared under his feet, and he took a step into the air. The 5th kill where my mother is belongs to me. From now on, I will protect her. You are unworthy. With those words, he disappeared from the chamber with a bang. The final 3 words were like an invisible sharp sword that stabbed into the person, causing him to tremble and lower his head with blood trickling down the corners of his mouth. It fell on the ground and died the rattling drum. It also died the purple wooden sword that was the size of a palm beside it. That wooden sword was something he had nourished for countless years and was prepared to give it to his son as a gift, a present that symbolized his apology and his desire to make it up to him. If Su Ming could see the sword, he would recognize it. It was the one he'd carved when he was young, and when he toyed with it, he even told Lei Chen in a heroic manner unique to children that he would walk down the path of berserkers, fly in the sky and charge through the ground, and with the wooden sword, he would travel through the entire land. Blood fell on the wooden sword and fused into its lines. The figure stared at it blankly, then closed its eyes in anguish. The chamber might be Dao Chen's isolation grounds, and its protection might be so incredibly terrifying that it was one of the few most tightly defended spots in true Morning Dao world. But the bald crane's power in disregarding all runes could weaken the defensive power even in this place. However, it was not enough to allow Su Ming to leave without any damage. But Su Xianyi did not want the rune in the place to deliver any backlash on Su Ming. At the instant Su Ming left, he had deactivated almost all the runes and seals in the place. This was the first time the seal over the rune was dissipated over a course of countless years, but Su Ming did not know that. When he left the chamber, he did not see the figure with his back turned towards him touching the rattling drum with trembling hands once he left. The man had tears trickling down his cheeks from his shut eyes. Neither did he see the shining seals on the trembling body. Is the plan to restore the Abyss Builders to their glory more important, or my family? Light murmurs came from the figure's mouth, betraying their speaker's endless fatigue. Su Ming left. He did not take with him any power, nor did he ask for any divine abilities, and neither did he ask about anything, because at that moment, he was his crazed, red-haired self. With resentment and anger he could not force down, he walked out of the isolation grounds, and when he appeared, he was standing on the altar. Sang stood by his side. Dao Lin and Dao Hua had also returned at some unknown point in time. At that moment, they had their eyes closed in the distance as if they were meditating, but in truth, their bodies and souls had been frozen in time. With red in his eyes, Su Ming cast a glance at Sang. He did not speak, but walked down the altar. A ruthless desire filled his whole body. He wanted to vent his anger, but could not find a target to do so. At that moment, Su Ming was madness personified. There was not a single bit of rationality left in him. With just the tiniest spark, a sea of fire would erupt from him, and he would not care about any consequences of his actions. Sang looked at Su Ming, then sighed. He had long since predicted this outcome, because he knew Su Ming. With a sigh, he swung his arm, and the air immediately distorted. An invisible gust of wind swept up Su Ming, Dao Lin, and Dao Hua. They disappeared from the place and returned to the place where the anointment ceremony was held. My young La Su has grown up. Sang shook his head. There was a hint of sentimentality in his eyes, along with a kindly love that Su Ming did not see. He stared at Su Ming's figure leaving into the distance, and after a long while, he raised his foot to step into the rune on the altar. He disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in Su Xianyi's isolation grounds. Master, he has left. Sang stared at the still trembling body in front of him, sighed in his heart, and lowered his head. The figure was silent for a moment before it asked slowly with fatigue in its voice. Sang, is restoring the Abyss Builder's glory more important, or is my family more important? If you were me, how would you choose? Sang too fell silent. After some time, he lifted his head and stared at the figure before speaking in a soft voice. Master, I will never forget your kindness to me. Even if I am not an Abyss Builder, for you, I can overturn Morning Dao and do everything that you ask me to do. Because, you are my master. Similarly, for Su Ming, I can give up on everything for him, because he is the young La Su I watched grow up. My whole life is only for the two of you. He did not answer Su Xianyi's question directly, but did so in a roundabout fashion. With his eyes shut, Su Xianyi fell silent. After a long, long time, the purple wooden sword in front of him flashed with light and charged towards Sang. Deliver this sword to him. Can he control this sword? Sang hesitated for a moment before he cast a glance at the seemingly normal purple wooden sword. Su Xianyi was silent for a moment, then whispered, he should have lived happily without knowing or understanding anything. He could have lived his lives happily. Even if they were fake, he could have still been happy. But he chose another path. This path is full of hardships and trials, and he has only walked a small portion of it. There is also a limit to how much I can help him. If he can control this sword, then he will be able to move forward through his path at a faster pace in the future. In fact, he would even be able to walk out of arid triad expanse cosmos. If he can't control it, it will still be a good thing. In silence, Sang nodded. In the air above the spot at the center of the 9 continents in the first plane in Morning Dao sect, the azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black turtle had 4 continents on their backs. The azure dragon was at the center. There was a large number of tables on the 4 continents, and an anointment ceremony was about to take place. There were less than 1 million out of the 10 million cultivators from Morning Dao sect who were worthy of sitting on the azure dragon's continent. These 1 million people were standing by the sides of the tables. The remaining cultivators were all at the spot used for the anointment ceremony. They had yet to possess the right to step on the azure dragon's continent. Located in 3 different directions from the azure dragon's continent were the vermilion bird, white tiger, and black turtle's continents. As the beasts roared, there were 3 gigantic cracks in the air above them, expanding as the lightning in them swam about. Around the 3 cracks were 24 sect masters keeping the lightning in control. The 3 sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing were each on one of the continents. People walked out of the crack above the black turtle's crack. The person in the lead was the old man from True Spirit Hell World, the 4th Great World. He was dressed in a blue robe, and the moment he stepped out, Reverend Z Long followed swiftly behind him. "We welcome the 4th True World," one of the 24 sect masters around the crack above the black turtle's continent immediately said. The near 1 million cultivators on the azure dragon's continent wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed towards the black turtle's continent. 4th True World. The voices from the near 1 million people were like thunder. When they echoed in the air, the old man in blue from the 4th True World smiled. He wrapped his fist in his palm towards the 24 sect masters beside the crack. Behind him, Reverend Z Long and the 1,000-something cultivators from the 4th True World all wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed deeply. "My fellow Taoists, you are too polite. Congratulations on anointing your dynasts, Morning Dao sect. I have prepared a congratulatory gift for them." The old man in blue smiled and swept his gaze past the 24 sect masters before finally looking at Sect Master Ri, who was one of the 3 strongest people in Morning Dao sect. "Old friend, I hope you are well. Brother Tan, you are as elegant as always. This way, please." A smile appeared on Sect Master Ri's face, and he pointed with his right hand towards the black turtle's continent. The old man in blue smiled faintly. As he nodded, he brought Reverend Z Long and the 1,000-something cultivators behind him to the black turtle's continent. Reverend Z Long's eyes shone while he scrutinized the crowd on the azure dragon's continent. With his level of cultivation, he could see everything there at one glance. He looked like he was searching for something, but in the end, he cast his eyes at the spot in the distance. At that moment, a chilling presence erupted from the crack above the white tiger's continent. At the same time, ancient bronze swords charged out with arrogance and an overbearing attitude. There were tens of thousands of them, and for a short period of time, they filled the entire area. In the end, 2 old men so old they looked as if they could not open their eyes walked out. These 2 old men had sullen expressions, and when they walked out, they turned their heads and cast a glance at Sect Master Yu of the 3 sect masters standing among the 24 other sect masters by the crack. A cold sneer appeared on their lips. Sect Master Yu had a smile on his face and wrapped his fist in his palm to greet them. The 2 old men, Yu and Ming, let out cold snorts. Without a single word, they charged towards the white tiger's continent with the tens of thousands of ancient bronze swords. They descended instantly, but none of the cultivators disembarked. Only Yu and Ming, as well as the middle-aged man in Life Realm previously tasked to fend against the barren lands of divine essence, stepped on the white tiger's continent. "Welcome, True Sacred Yin World," one of the 24 sect masters said with an imposing voice. Once he spoke, the 1 million cultivators on the azure dragon's continent sported odd expressions, but they still wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed to the white tiger's continent. "I'm not important enough to receive your greeting. Where is Dao Kong?" the old Ming said coldly and flatly. His voice had a rotting presence to it, but the instant he spoke, the crack in the air above the vermilion bird's continent suddenly let a shocking dragon's roar pass through it. A gigantic abyss dragon extended its huge head from the crack. When it rushed out, 1,000-something abyss dragons behind it flew out as well. Sitting on the first and largest abyss dragon was the 3rd prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World. By his side was Yu Xian. A complicated look flashed briefly through her eyes before her expression returned to apathy that made it look like her heart was dead. We welcome the Emperor of Abyss True World. All three great true worlds had arrived, and they were all waiting for the arrival of the Morning Dao Sect's dynasts. Chapter 1099 That One Look. 6 Haha. Congratulations on anointing your dynasts, Morning Dao Sect. I look forward to how majestic they will become. This time, I came on behalf of my father to congratulate you and become acquainted with Morning Dao Sect's dynasts, the handsome third prince said while standing on a gigantic abyss dragon. He did not even need to show his cultivation base show for his presence alone to be peerless. He came from the Emperor of Abyss True World, the only one who had abyss dragons. As the 24 sect masters from Morning Dao Sect smiled, the 1,000 abyss dragons circled above the Vermilion Birds continent. The cultivators from the Emperor of Abyss True World standing on them descended after the third prince grabbed Xianxia by his side and landed first. When they left the 1,000 abyss dragons, the beasts immediately roared towards the sky, deafening the crowd. Their eyes shone with a fierce light, and they glared at the 4 saint beasts who supported the continents in Morning Dao Sect. Shut up, the third prince said faintly. When he spoke, it looked as if 1,000 invisible hands had seized the 1,000 abyss dragons and cut off their roars. This scene immediately caused the cultivators from Morning Dao Sect to look at him askance, but naturally, there were a few people who could tell that the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World was putting on a show. Abyss dragons were not ordinary creatures. They possessed intelligence akin to that of a normal person and would naturally not roar like wild beasts in this sort of situation. It was clear that the third prince had asked them to do this in advance so that he could show his power. Welcome, my fellow Taoists from the True Worlds. We welcome you in our ceremony here in Morning Dao Sect. Today is the day of the anointment ceremony. Everyone. The 72 sect masters in the sky had spread out at that moment to surround the area. Sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing stood in the distance with smiles on their faces. The person who spoke was Sect Master Yu. However, before he could finish speaking, a hoarse, cold snort cut him off. Tens of thousands of ancient bronze swords shone with a sharp light above the White Tiger's continent. Among the many tables on the continent stood the old Yu and Ming along with the middle-aged man in Life Realm. The one who spoke was old Ming, and his words were brusque. I'll ask a second time, where is Dao Kong? When he spoke, his voice was like thunder that reverberated in all directions. It immediately caused the people from the 4th True World who were on the Black Turtle's continent to look at him askance. Even the people from the Emperor of Abyss True World on the Vermilion Birds continent looked over. All of them had heard Dao Kong's name. Some of them were as calm as ever, some adapted odd expressions, while some smiled faintly, looking as if they were ready for an entertaining show. Dao Kong, the one who destroyed the forces of power from true sacred Yin world stationed in the barren lands of divine essence in one go? I heard before that he is one of the dynasts in Morning Dao Sect, the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World said languidly while smiling faintly. His words might have seemed ordinary, but in truth, there was no doubt that he was just fanning the flames. After all, once the prideful third prince had learned of what Dao Kong did, he was in a state of shock for a long time. Even though he refused to believe in this matter, there was a strange jealousy growing in him. By his side, Yu Xian remained numb. Not a single change in her expression could be detected. It did not matter to her whether it was Dao Kong or anyone else. None of them could cause her heart to stir even a single bit. Among the ones from the 4th True World was an old man Lianshan who kept a smile on his face. His thoughts could not be read, but by his side, Reverend Zilong had a slightly complicated expression on his face. He sighed lightly. The destruction of the forces of power from true sacred Yin world stationed in the barren lands of divine essence and the appearance of the 5th kill were more than enough. If he did not understand these hints and did not know that the person he'd met before was the current dynast Dao Kong, he would be unworthy of his level of cultivation and would not have the right to be known by the others as Reverend Zilong. Everything that happened in the 5th kill and the 5th ocean were things that would be difficult for him to forget in his life, especially in regards to Dao Kong who'd risen to such power. A hint of admiration formed in the depths of his heart towards that man. Right now, we are holding our anointment ceremony, so old Ming, please control yourself a little. The Dao Kong you wish to see is about to arrive soon, Sect Master Yu said flatly after casting a cold glance at Yu and Ming of True Sacred Yin World. The old Ming let out a cold bark of laughter, but he did not speak. His previous words were just to show the other True World's True Sacred Yin World's domineerance and that they would absolutely not let this matter go so easily. It also made the other True Worlds who wanted to interfere to think carefully before they acted. The anointment ceremony starts now. We welcome the three great dynasts of Morning Dao sect. Elder Yu's voice was calm. When it echoed in the air, he raised his arms and swung them. The world immediately roared. When a loud bang shook the area, 3 long arcs descended from the sky. They immediately attracted the attention of all the cultivators in the area, especially those from True Sacred Yin World. They even looked over with killing intent in their eyes. Compared to the calmness exuded by the old man in blue, Reverend Z Long immediately fixed his gaze on the 3 long arcs, then locked onto the purple long arc at the center. The third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World looked over coldly. By his side, Yu Xian looked ahead. Her gaze was empty, as if her soul was not inside her body. With a loud bang, all 3 long arcs descended. Once they did so and the light from them grew to a dazzling degree, voice came from the Azure Dragon's continent and the space beneath it. Greetings, your highnesses. The tumbling voices could have drowned out thunder. As they reverberated in the air, the 75 scattered sect masters wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed together to the 3 long arcs which had descended. When the dazzling lights spread out, the purple, red, and orange lights instantly reached a dazzling degree before they vanished to reveal Dao Kong, Dao Lin, and Dao Hua. Around Dao Hua's body were 9 lotuses. The power of those in Solar Kalpa realm spread from him due to him not attempting to hide even a single bit of it. There was arrogance on his face, along with excitement. As for Dao Lin, he had 12 lotuses surrounding him. The power of those in Mastery realm spread out from him, causing him to instantly become the center of attention. However, their ability to capture the other people's attention had only lasted for an instant before everyone's eyes were drawn to Su Ming. Long red hair, bloodshot eyes, bloodthirstiness in his crazed gaze, 18 lotuses which should have been white but had now been dyed blood red and were shining with a crimson light that wrought fear to the other people's hearts. This was Su Ming when the emotions he'd suppressed all his life burst out and the desire for destruction filled every part of his body. There was a strong, malicious air about him. His appearance instantly made him the center of attention, attracting the gazes of all the people in the area. An arrogant, domineering presence filled with an air of those with an absolute disregard for laws spread out with a bang from the crimson-haired Su Ming. The domineering will was a madness belonging to those who would kill the moment they arrived at a disagreement with someone else. His arrogance was a madness that allowed him to destroy an entire camp from a true world. The presence belonging to those with an absolute disregard for laws was a terrifying attitude that put not mind to any sort of consequences. All those who met Su Ming's gazes felt their hearts tremble. Su Ming's gaze, which was filled with destruction, shot through their hearts like arrows, and they sucked in sharp breaths of air. It was especially so for the cultivators from Morning Dao sect. They might have witnessed everything regarding Su Ming's journey, but they had never seen him with his hair red. When they saw him at that moment, their hearts trembled. Yu Xian was looking ahead blankly. Even when Su Ming appeared, she did not lift her head. Nothing in this place could stir up her emotions. She might have stepped into Morning Dao sect, but while this place might be true Morning Dao world, it was not Yin Death region, not the land of berserkers. The 9th summit she was familiar with was not there, and neither was he. That was why she did not lift her head. However, when she noticed that the 3rd prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World had sucked in a sharp breath upon raising his head in front of her, she looked up as well and saw a person standing in the air like the sun at noon. The 2 people beside him seemed to have become like green leaves used as decorations for him to stand out more. While examining him, she saw his red eyes. That one glance caused Yu Xian's body to tremble furiously. She fixed her gaze on Su Ming, and the apathy in her instantly disappeared, as if her soul had swiftly returned to her body during that moment. The lusterless look in her eyes vanished, replaced by a hint of spiritedness and rapid breathing. She did not dare believe her own eyes. Her body trembled. She gripped the corners of her sleeves tightly. During that moment, she forgot everything and everyone around her. There was only one person in her eyes, only Su Ming. The person looked unfamiliar, yet he felt incredibly familiar. That familiarity was buried deep in her soul, and it was a beautiful memory she would never forget in her life. Su Ming's appearance might have changed, but his soul had not changed. His presence might be different from the past, but Yu Xian's will had been in the kiss to deliver the breath to complete his soul. That breath was in his soul, and they had long since fused together. He could deceive everyone else, but he could not deceive Yu Xian. She bit her bottom lip, and a smile gradually appeared on her face. It was a smile that had not graced her face no matter whether she was sleeping or awake during the course of the past 1,000-something years. There was livelines in that smile, along with mischievousness, deep and fond remembrance, and gentleness that would not disappear. It was as if she had been revived and fully woken up from apathy. She smiled, and her smile was incredibly beautiful, unforgettable to anyone who caught at least a glimpse of it. It was an expression that belonged to Yu Xian. It was a smile that was mischievous and adorable, and smile that was like dazzling fireworks in her glistening eyes moist with tears. She stared at Su Ming. The obsession in that look of hers seemed to have been noticed by Su Ming's currently crazed heart. It caused him to lower his head, and his gaze shot through the 1,000 abyss dragons towards the Vermilion Birds continent where resided the people from the Emperor of Abyss True World. Right there was also Yu Xian, staring at him from behind the third prince. That one look. Su Ming jolted. He saw a figure that even when he had sunken into madness and his heart was filled with the desire for destruction, he would still be unable to forget. His madness was a bloodlust to destroy all the living, but that figure had been branded in his mind so deep that even if the universe collapsed, he would still be unable to wipe it away from his memories. Do you know why I'm called Yu Xian? The meaning for Xian is daylily, and it is a type of flower that forgets sadness. I'm a daylily in the rain. This is the name my mother gave me. She wanted me to forget the sadness in my life and be happy forever. My mother is calling me now. I'll be leaving to reunite with my mother. Before I leave, I'll give you a gift. The kiss in the past had turned into the long look at that moment. If the galaxy was destroyed and the broken shards arranged into a canvas, what would appear on them would be her face. Chapter 1100. My right hand won that one kiss, this one look. Time seemed to have fused with the air to turn it into yellowing rice paper. Color seemed to have withered away, like time had turned it into dull ink, but the smile on the face formed by the fragmented pieces of Su Ming's memories on the canvas was still the same as before. The song in the land of berserkers had ended, and the audience had left. The fragments of his memories had fallen all over the floor in a wretched state and crushed a heart filled with happiness. Callousness lasts eternally during the night, and in endless loneliness, she had closed her eyes. She refused to wake up. This was Yu Xian. Yet there had always been a hint of fond remembrance in her gasping for breath through the passage of time, but it could no longer find the brightness from the past. In the darkness of her slumber, midnight lasted for a long time. The night was cold, but the silk blanket was thin, and she wondered whether the person she liked would be cold too. That one kiss, this one look. She could no longer talk about her feelings. When she turned her head back, she felt as if she had left the past behind. She was alone while she leaned against dusk, but she could not see its color. She only mumbled in her heart and lamented how unpredictable destiny was. This was also Yu Xian. The crimson-haired Su Ming stood in midair with everyone watching him, but his gaze was fixed on one person. It was as if time had stopped, as if there was no longer any other form of life in the area around them, like she was the only one. The separation of 1,000-something years has lasted for a long time. When Su Ming was in the barren lands of divine essence, Shu Hui's company, by Ling's gentle but aloof words, all of these things had made him forget many things, but at the depths of his heart, there was always a small white flower in the rain, and the name of that flower was Daylily. She had kissed him once. When their gazes met each other's after a long separation, the determination and gentleness in the girl's eyes and the sadness as well as madness in Su Ming's eyes was a scene that would never fade away in the passage of time. He still remembered that one kiss that marked their parting. It was not a separation where someone left into the distance, but a separation by death. From then on, there should have been no longer any girl in the world who was so spirited and would smile in such a manner. Once she kissed him, she stepped on the wind and slowly let her eyes fall shut. Her petite figure fused into the air, because she knew that once she left, they would most likely not meet even in their next life. "You are Dao Kong." A cold voice laced with killing intent traveled through the air like a gust of sinister wind from the White Tiger's continent. It reverberated in the air, and was like an extremely sharp blade which wanted to slice through all enmity. However, no matter how sharp that blade was, it could not cut down the only thing within Su Ming's field of vision at that moment. He had ignored the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World, which was why he did not see the prince turning his head back at that moment and noticing how peculiar Yu Xian was acting. He did not see how stunned he was by that breathtaking sight before his expression turned dark. He could not stand the sight of the smile that had not appeared for a long, long time on Yu Xian's face. It was a pity that the smile was not directed towards him. As the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World slowly turned his head around and saw the gaze shared between Su Ming and Yu Xian, rage rose in his eyes. He snorted coldly, then right in front of Su Ming's face, he raised his right hand and seized Yu Xian's neck. He squeezed it tightly and yanked her to his side, even sniffing the center of her brows. He lifted his chin, and with a hint of derision and provocation in his eyes, he lifted his head, to look towards Su Ming. The crimson-haired Su Ming could disregard old Ming's voice from the White Tiger's continent and not bother with the emotions of all the other people around him. But when he saw pain on Yu Xian's face when the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World seized her as she still tried to maintain the smile on her face, he descended into madness. The crimson-haired Su Ming had always been outrageous and showed complete disregard for the laws as well as any consequences. The strong desire to vent his anger he'd suppressed in his heart when he was in Su Xianyi's isolation grounds was something that could erupt from within him at any moment. With just a small spark, it could make the crimson-haired Su Ming act with reckless abandon. If the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World had not done anything, then under the effect of Yu Xian's smile and gaze, Su Ming would have slowly calmed down until he returned to normal. If that had happened, then perhaps there wouldn't have been much slaughter on that day. However, the ignorant third prince and his foolish action became the spark that ignited Su Ming's madness. He became the spark that released the madness that had been hidden in Su Ming's heart since he returned from the barren lands of divine essence. It was something that would push him to destroy the entire camp of the forces of power from true sacred Yin world at the moment of the slightest disagreement. A monstrous sea of fire erupted from Su Ming's body with a bang. It swept through the entire area with a loud bang. Immediately, Dao Lin and Dao Hua were swept away together. They coughed up blood at the same time, and the flourishing lotuses on their bodies instantly activated. Only because of that were they not killed under the impact of the sea of fire as they fell backwards. At the instant the sea of fire erupted, the people from true Morning Dao world on the Azure Dragon's continent immediately stood up and stared at the sky in shock. At the same time, the expression of all the sect masters in Morning Dao sect surrounding the area immediately changed. It was especially obvious if one looked at sect masters Ri, Yu, and Xing. When they looked towards Su Ming, they frowned. They were very aware of true sacred Yin world's intention for coming to this place, and they had also thought about how to handle the situation. Since Dao Kong had already become a dynast, they could not allow true sacred Yin world to kill him. This was something that true sacred Yin world knew very well as well. If worse came to worst, they would just punish him slightly, and at most, they would just have to compensate them a little. As long as they showed enough respect to true sacred Yin world and Su Ming chose to suffer a little, they could minimize the problem. As for how they would choose to completely solve it, they had another method to do so. However, Su Ming had chosen to release a sea of fire at that moment, shattering their arrangements in an instant. As the three sect masters frowned and were about to rebuke him, Su Ming suddenly let out a string of maniacal laughter. The sea of fire around him surged into the sky. This fire was not the fire from Flame Fiend's progenitor, but the flames of resentment suppressed in the crazed Su Ming's heart. On a certain level, this fire was similar to the flames belonging to the resentful Wei Yi. Almost the instant the sea of fire surged to the heavens, Su Ming took a swift step forward and turned into a long arc to charge towards the Vermilion Birds continent, where resided the people from the Emperor of Abyss True World. The expression of the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World changed drastically at that moment. With a sullen face, he swung his arm, and the 1,000 abyss dragons floating around the Vermilion Birds continent roared simultaneously as they charged towards Su Ming. This scene caused the people in the area to be stunned, especially the sect masters. They had thought that Su Ming was targeting True Sacred Yin World. In fact, True Sacred Yin World had already made preparations the moment the Sea of Fire erupted from Su Ming's body. However, he did not spare the White Tiger's continent even a glance. He just charged straight towards the Vermilion Bird's continent, where resided the people from the Emperor of Abyss True World. All of this might have seemed to have happened over a long period of time, but in truth, it took only an instant. As the Sea of Fire surged into the sky, Su Ming had already collided against the Abyss Dragons which had rushed towards him. The Abyss Dragon in the lead was the third prince's stead. The mighty pressure spreading out from this dragon, which was the largest among all of them, made it clear that it was equivalent to those in Mastery Realm. Yet it was an Abyss Dragon. No matter how great their levels of cultivation were, they were Abyss Dragons whose souls were controlled for generations by the Emperor of Abyss True World. It was also only this sort of level of cultivation which could allow the dragon to become the stead of the third prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World. The dragon's body was filled with an ancient presence. At that moment, when it rushed towards Su Ming, it opened its ghastly mouth and let out a shocking roar. Rare! The crimson-haired Su Ming did not stop for even a single moment. At the instant he was about to collide with the incoming Abyss Dragon, he lifted his right hand and threw a punch at them. With a loud bang, Su Ming's punch fell on the lead Abyss Dragon, and it immediately shuddered. It fell back from the force of the attack. Its flesh and blood trembled, and with a loud whoosh, tens of thousands of wounds tore through its body apart. Soon after, a large amount of blood gushed while its body fell backwards, and in just the span of a few breaths, all the flesh and blood from the dragon's entire body was separated from its bones. When it fell back, a blood fog surrounded the dragon. All of its flesh and blood were destroyed, and what remained was only an empty skeletal frame. Even its life force and soul had been destroyed under the rebound caused by Su Ming's punch. With a loud bang, the skeletal frame scattered on the ground, right in front of the third prince from the Emperor of Abyss True World. It caused the third prince to shudder, and he pulled Xianxia in front of him. He stood up as well, with disbelief on his face, his breathing quickening. Abyss Dragon Formation, stimulate your life force, kill that person. The remaining 1,000 Abyss Dragons in the sky were only in the later stage of World Plane Realm. They were chosen carefully by the third prince, which was why their levels of cultivation were the same. At that moment, the 1,000 Abyss Dragons roared towards the sky and charged towards Su Ming together. While doing so, they connected with each other in a bizarre manner. Each Abyss Dragon bit down on another Abyss Dragon's tail. Like that, they formed a circle, instantly surrounding Su Ming, who was charging madly to the Vermilion Bird's continent. Everything had happened so suddenly that the crowd in the area had only just registered what had happened at that moment. It was especially so for the true Morning Dao disciples on the Azure Dragon's continent. They immediately flew up and had their cultivation bases erupt from their bodies. This was true Morning Dao world, and the one surrounded by 1,000 Abyss Dragons at that moment was Dao Kong, their dynast who had just been anointed moments ago. During the challenge, they could fight and even try to kill each other, but when there were external enemies, they were fellow members who would move as one. This was a teaching carved into them over countless years in Morning Dao sect. It was etched so deep into the bones of the disciples of Morning Dao sect that it had become a brand in their souls. The people from the fourth great true world on the Black Turtle's continent remained composed. A glint shone in the old man in blue's eyes. He did not open his mouth to speak though. By his side, Reverend Zi Long frowned. He might have fought against Su Ming before, but in the end, they had formed a strange type of friendship between them. They might not have spoken about this friendship, but it existed. If they had to speak of a source for it, then perhaps it was born from a type of guilt and respect in Reverend Zi Long. He felt guilty for leaving when he was in the Fifth Ocean, and he respected Su Ming for doing all the shocking things. Morning Dao sect, look at you. I wonder whether this is an anointment ceremony, or whether this is a slaughter fest which you intend to make all of us who have come from the three great true worlds observe. The dynast you have anointed is a lunatic. This person could destroy an entire camp from true sacred Yin world stationed in the barren lands of divine essence. Now, with just the slightest bit of disagreement, he went mad and killed an Abyss Dragon, and judging by his actions, he looks like he wants to kill our fellow Daoist from the Emperor of Abyss True World. Is this really the dynast you anointed? Old Ming asked in derision while standing on the white tiger's continent.